Who would be the audience for your media product? My media product's audience would predominantly be those who have an interest in or are fans of heavy metal rock. This magazine fits in well with the uses of gratification because not only can the magazine help form personal identity, but it can also build relationships between the friends. The readers will be tuning into something they all personally like. And with this comes the best part, which is the viral marketing. This form of advertising can lure the reader into buying the magazine if they hadn't already. So in a sense, it not only benefits the subjects involved, but the company itself. Music in general is described as a form of relaxation, which helps individuals escape their own reality. Here the magazine can also help with this use of gratification because once reading or being informed that an artist of your interest is releasing a new album, it can automatically inform you. Music in general is usually described as a form of relaxation, which helps individuals to escape their own reality. Here the magazine can also help with this use of gratification because once reading or being notified that an artist of your interest is releasing a new album, it informs you of the new album, meaning that you'll be prepared to listen to it. Overall, it's easy to see that the magazine would fulfill all uses of gratification because it's informative, helps with identity and the building of relationship, and also to escape. So generically, the audience in which this magazine is aiming to is everyone who definitely likes rock or heavy metal, and this magazine here will and can fulfill all the uses of gratification. How did you attract or address your audience? There are many things which I use to attract my audience. One of them being the colours which I used. As mentioned before, the front cover must make a statement and catch the reader and the audience attention. And with this in mind, I used bright and bold colours such as an electric orange, white, and mahogany red as a colour which refers back to the element of heavy metal rock. It makes the front cover attractive, and having a basic colour, nothing too flashy, makes it interesting for the reader. The magazine in its own setting isn't ordinary to most of the other heavy metal magazines. I used these methods so that my product would stand out and to also try and eliminate competition. Another way in which I tried to attract and address my audience is by changing the layout. My layout of my product is different because it's a Halloween special. So it doesn't have the ordinary features which a heavy metal mag would. For example, there is less on the front cover because the main focus of the magazine is for it to stay concentrated and rooted on the Halloween topic. Another factor which I used to attract my audience was the fact that I made a Halloween special. It sounds quite exclusive, therefore people will feel the need to buy it, as another edition of the Halloween special may not be published for at least another year. I used an offer to attract my audience, and that was by using a skyline which advertised there were tickets to be won. This is one of the great attributes of this magazine because everyone loves something that's free. I had very few boosts apart from the one which advertised that my magazine was a Halloween special. In this instance, I didn't use boosts as much because it would take attraction away from the basis of the magazine. In terms of contents, I used cover lines which have some enigma in them to make the reader wonder. This I classified as enticing nature because it entices the reader to want to buy and to read further and find out about the cover lines. The cover lines themselves are only band names which will further attract my audience because they'll become interested as to why the band is featuring in the issued magazine. I also attracted my audience through the language throughout the whole magazine. For example, my referencing to the sinister names of the artists, Poison, Ultimate Darkness. It is also apparent in my contents page when I place some more information referencing to the article. For example, on the Devil's Illusions, the text is mysterious and asks a rhetorical question. Have you danced with the devil? Then it answers it for you. Thought not. This here clearly addressed my audience because of the language I was using. And by asking a rhetorical question, it got the reader to think. And this involves them and makes the magazine more personal. Another way which I addressed my audience is that through the double page spread when reading the interview, you can almost picture yourself asking the questions. and personally get a response back because it's in that style which involves the reader. Overall, it's not a full-blown article which excludes the reader, but instead it engages and sustains the reader's interest. What have you learnt about the technologies from the process of constructing this product? There are many things in which I learnt when making the magazine and in the process of making the product in itself. At the very beginning, I was introduced to WordPress because this was the device in which I'd be using to upload my work and do my work on. This was new to me because it was my first time hearing and using the program itself. This program was very useful in the fact that I could, one, have access to it at home, and I could also start or add posts from the comfort of my own home, so it made the work very easy and flexible because I could easily access it. I also had to become accustomed to the use of a camera because this is what I use to take pictures for my product. Even though I'd used the camera before, this was different as it was an SLR, not a normal digital. And because I had to think of lighting levels and if the camera shot would fit in with my type of genre. All in all, it was a learning experience because if I was to be given a camera to do the same task or more, I'll be more knowledgeable about what to do and how to go about it. During the process of making the product, we had to use technologies such as the Max and Photoshop. This was out of my comfort zone because I had generally been used to using Windows computers, not the software on the Mac. During the process of making the product, we had to use technologies such as the Max and Photoshop. This was out of my comfort zone because I had generally been used to using Windows computers, not the software on the Mac computers. For example, on the Windows computers, to print screen, all you had to do was press the print screen button itself. However, on the Macs, it's a lot different because you had to press Command, Shift, and then 4. Then you had to select your designated area, then it print screens it all for you. Furthermore, when using Photoshop, I used a number of tools which helped me towards finishing my product. For example, I firstly used guidelines because these helped me to locate where my essentials would go, such as my product's picture, the gutter lines, and where the body text would be placed. I learned through Photoshop that in order to be able to move different parts of your magazine, you must create separate layers for each and every item. Otherwise, it will all move together, which makes it harder for you to edit the product and make them essential amendments. Using rulers in Photoshop made the whole production process easier because having an equal basis and knowing where everything goes just made the placing features of the magazine seem like such an easy process. The difference between the lasso tool and the crop tool is that the lasso tool, you can cut right around the object, whereas the cut tool, you can only crop in the box outlining. How to use the clone tool. This tool here came to a real benefit to my product. Looking back at your preliminary task, what do you feel you have learned in the progression from it to the full product? Looking back at the preliminary task, this was just when I had firstly been introduced to Photoshop. When I compare my preliminary product to my final, I can see a huge improvement. One of those reasons being that I had much more time in order to develop, change and get feedback on what looked more suitable for the genre of heavy metal rock. As to the preliminary task, which was just a pretty basic and general attempt at making the magazine. Looking at my front cover, in comparison to my preliminary task's front cover, I can deduce that I learned how to place features on the magazine. For example, in my preliminary task, I did not have a skyline, and in general, the title just seems as though it was placed there with no thought. But if I look to my final product, I can see that the masthead has a stance in the magazine and is one of the main features which you recognise. It is also clear to see that the way in which the cover lines were presented in the preliminary task is completely different to how they was in the final product. In the final product, you can deduce that there was some effort and time put in place so that the cover lines could be directly the same size and spread out equally between the orange dividers. It's even more of an improvement because I placed a subhead which allocates that the cover lines were all exclusive interviews. And comparing this to my preliminary task, I did not implement such a feature, and it's apparent because it's not very clear what the cover lines are there for. There are things in which my front cover and my preliminary task have in common. And these things are, they both have very dominant pictures which make a statement towards the magazine. Obviously, my front covers... I used main cover lines on both pieces, but the cover line on the final product is much more centrally located, trying to keep the consistency of the theme. Whereas the preliminary task's front cover line was random and not really relevant. Comparing the contents page of my final product to my piece in which I did during my planning, it's easy to see that my final product has an equally divided space in between the subheads. Whereas in the preliminary task, it was uneven and looked very disorganized. Whereas in the final product, it was very much more structured. Clearly the progression here is that as time passed, I have been able to learn how to set out the page properly and execute that of which I learned from analysing Kerrang and Q's magazines. During the process of making my double page spread, it is apparent that I used one of my flat plan ideas but slightly switched it up. All of the elements which I named in the flat plan, such as a kicker, pull quote, cover line, main image, byline, caption, and page numbers, are all in the double page spread. This here shows that from not making a plan and doing the preliminary task without one just emphasised that planning is definitely an essential part of making the product. As I have here, I used my flat plan in order to contrast the similar looking double page spread. This is major progression and shows that all the planning I had done was taken into consideration and implemented in the means of making a good media product.